Hey friends, this is Soph. I got into USC's MBA program with $20,000 in scholarship back in 2020. Here are some of the things that I did in my application process to get that $20,000 in scholarships. So the application process is broken down to two parts essentially. The first part is the application that you submit to the school. The second part is the interview that you may or may not get afterwards. Let's first talk about the application that you put together. I would say there are four major parts of the application that I submitted. First is GMAT, second is GPA, third is the personal essay. There are 2 questions in the essay. Fourth is your resume/work experience. Let's talk about the numbers. Let's start with GPAs and GMAT. I graduated with a 3.83 GPA from my undergrad in supply chain and information systems. It's a pretty good GPA. In my personal opinion, is good enough. Then there is the GMAT. Boy, do I have a lot of stories from when I took the GMAT. One of them including me crying in a coffee shop because I couldn't get a high enough quant score in my GMAT, but I took it 2 times total, and the second time I got the score that I wanted, was acceptable to me, which was 690. It wasn't extremely high, like it's not over 700. I think a lot of people say that if you want to shoot for a really good business school, then you should aim for over 700 GMAT score. I couldn't get there. It was doing too much to my mental health and to my stress level, so I just settled with a 690. The next major component of my application was my essays. There were 2 essays that I need to write about back in 2019, and this was pre-ChatGPT days, so I had two friends to look over my essays and kind of give me suggestions. The first question for the essay is, what are your short-term and long-term personal and professional goals? And how do you expect an MBA from USC Marshall to help you reach your goals? The short-term goal, I talked about how I want to be a people manager in my team in supply chain. For the long-term goals, I talked about how in the future, at the time I had this idea that I wanted to start a company to service small or medium-sized firms that don't have in-house sourcing capabilities. The second essay prompt is, as a Marshall student, you will be expected to foster collaboration and diversity within the Trojan family. Please discuss the contribution you will make to your online MBA classmates' educational experience at Marshall. Discuss how these contributions will enrich your cohort. This was an essay that I was more passionate to write about compared to the first essay, and in this essay I wrote a lot about gender equality. The way I was brought up, I just cared about it a lot more, and I think in the end the essays turned out to be more genuine and higher quality than my first essay. The last major component of my MBA application was the resume/work experience. The admission committee obviously want their cohort to be as diverse as possible. At the same time, they want all the students with a diverse background to be able to succeed in the program and graduate and find a good job. So the resume is where you kind of showcase your background, where you came from, your work experience. I come from personally a industrial manufacturing background, which isn't unique per se, but is also like so rare that it would just stand me out immediately. I would say at the end in my cohort, a lot of the classmates come from consulting, tech, health care backgrounds. So maybe there are 2-3 other people that comes from traditional industrial manufacturing, but there wasn't a lot of people with the background that I had. I believe it helped me to a certain extent, but like I said, it didn't stand me out immediately. Next is the interview portion of the admission process. I remember logging into my email one day to see an email from an admission administrator. She told me that I will get an email from the automatic system email to schedule an interview. And obviously I was so excited when I saw her email telling me that I had an interview. At the same time, I remember being so nervous because I don't know how I would fare in an interview compared to other prospective students. Historically, I've noticed that for my other job interviews, I would get phone screens and maybe 1 or 2 rounds of interview, but they never materialize into an actual job offer. That just led me to think, one, like it could be that me and the job are just not a good fit, or it could be that I'm just terrible at interviewing. On top of that, I remember back when I was in high school, I interviewed for undergrad at Duke. That also didn't pan out. So with all of that background, I had this fear that, like, you know, I'm not gonna do well. The admission committee is not going to like me when I show up in person. So to kind of improve my chances and performance at the actual interview, I scheduled a phone call with the admission administrator, Terry, to ask about, first of all, what is the admission committee going to ask me? What should I prepare for? I even pulled up the notes that I took from my meeting with Terry, the admission coordinator. Here are some of the questions that I asked her. First is whether the interview is going to be one-on-one or whether it's going to be a panel interview. 2 is whether the admission committee will have read my application by the time they interview me. 3rd is whether the interview is going to be behavioral or not. And 4 is kind of the logistics of the interview. What happens before? How do I log in? And what happens afterwards? How do I know whether I was good enough for the admission committee? So after that conversation with her, I felt better prepared. I knew that it was going to be a panel interview. I know that the admission committee will have read my application and it is going to be a behavioral interview. At this point, I kind of knew how to prepare for it. So I just went on Google and Googled top MBA interview behavioral questions. And some of the questions that I came across included why is USC Marshall a good program for me? And talk about experiences where I've led a team successfully. What other experience can I think of that demonstrate my ability to make an impact? So those are the questions that I prepared for. I don't remember in the end what was asked exactly of me, but I do remember the interview being very lighthearted. There were 4 people that was on the panel interview. They started the interview off with, tell me about your favorite TV shows. At the time, I don't watch a lot of TV shows. I don't watch a lot of TV shows now either, but I have rewatched Friends 1,000 times. So I must have talked about Friends, which is very basic. I talked about that TV show for maybe a full minute. And it was a good question because it definitely relaxed me and it kind of made the conversation a lot more casual and less serious than I thought it was going to be. And because of that, I think I did better because I was just able to be myself in that interview. The interview probably lasted 15-20 minutes. It didn't last the full half an hour that I was scheduled for. By the time the interview was over, I had a pretty good feeling, but I didn't quite know how good it was. I knew it was probably good enough to get me in, but it wasn't good enough for a scholarship. A couple weeks after, I got an email from the admission committee saying that not only was I accepted, I was awarded a $20,000 in a scholarship from the Forte Foundation. Now, if you are a female and you apply to an MBA program that is part of the Forte Foundation, you are automatically considered for a Forte Fellowship and the scholarship that comes with it. So there wasn't anything extra that I needed to do. Now, what got me that scholarship, right? I think there are 2 main things that got me that scholarship. One is in the essay one of my essay was just talking about gender equality. And I think that helped me a great deal. Forte Foundation, their mission is to propel women into business and make sure that there is female representation in business leadership. And I think the fact that I wrote about gender equality, which is a topic that I'm very personally invested in, definitely helped me a lot. The second thing that I did that may have helped me to get my scholarship is, I think, the interview itself. I wasn't particularly charming. I don't think I ever am in an interview, but the fact that I was able to be myself and just talk about things that I cared about, including TV shows like Friends, that really helped. I also remember there was a question that the admission committee asked, which was like, why do you want to go to a business school? And my answer was that, I grew up, my dad was a businessman, he was an entrepreneur. And even though growing up, I rarely got to see him because he was working a lot, but he was able to create a business and use the income from that business to pay for my education. And obviously when you have a figure in your life like that, you want to kind of go after their footsteps and do similarly good things to those around you. I remember talking about that, and I probably spoke from the bottom of my heart, and the admission committee kind of sensed that. So the tips to get a scholarship to USC Marshall, I think, is first and foremost is just to be yourself. I am, like I said, not a particularly charming person in interview, and I'm not good at talking about my achievements, but because I was able to talk about topics that I was passionate about and speak from the bottom of my heart, I think that really helped me with getting the scholarship. Second of all is, pretty basic. Make sure that your GMAT score is as high as your stress level will tolerate. Obviously, if anybody spend more time on GMAT, they will get a higher score. It's just that trade-off of how much time do I want to spend versus how much this is the score. Just find a balance that works for you, a score that's good enough, but also it's not going to stress you out where you're going to be crying in a coffee shop like I did, or stab yourself in the stomach. I don't know. And third is the essays, I think. This is where you talk about the topics that you're passionate about, which could later be used in your interview. And having a friend or two look over my essays and edit them was a great help, because one, they were able to, correct my grammatical mistakes, which ChatGPT can now do. Second, they were able to kind of bring to my attention the qualities that they see in me that I don't necessarily see myself. One of the things that my friend told me about was that lean into my experience of going to study abroad when I was 15. I grew up in China, and I went to high school, a private high school in Florida when I was 15 by myself. I had no family, no friends, no nothing in Florida. I just went and studied and got into college and all that stuff. And my friend was like, why don't you talk about that? Lean into it. That is a unique background that 99% of other people don't have. And the fact that you were able to navigate that kind of course is proof to say that you will be able to do great in this program. Those are the 3 tips. Be yourself, get a higher GMAT score or GPA if you're still in school, but make sure that you take your stress level and mental health into consideration as well. And third is to have a friend that you trust to look over your essays and give you advice, particularly on the things that you don't notice yourself, but someone around you may notice. All right, that is it, friends. I do have another video on whether I think the MBA is worth it in the end at USC. You can find the video here. And in the meantime, take care. I will see you soon. Bye.